So probably quite a sort of timely place to hand over.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Tom van Deijnen. I'm originally from Holland, so on social media, etc. I'm Tom of Holland, if you're interested in seeing a bit more of my work. I'm a textile artist and activist, or craftivist, as some people say. I started the Visible Mending program, which is about highlighting that the art and craftsmanship of clothes repair is particularly relevant in a world where more and more people voice their dissatisfaction with the way we deal with throwaway culture in fashion. So the Visible Mending program tries to help people repair their clothes and use them for longer. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So one of the things that people are starting to get interested in is how can you make your clothes last longer? So there's a few things that you need to think about. If you make your clothes last longer but you still keep buying loads of things, then you're kind of not doing very much towards it. But the clothes that you already have, if you air them between wears instead of washing them after one wear, is a good way to keep the fabric going longer. Air drying instead of a tumble dryer, or ironing less. Nothing is ironed that I'm wearing. And obviously repair and reuse. And that's where my Visible Mending program comes in. So I've been thinking about what this fragility in mending clothes means, and I think I run quite a lot of workshops, and there's like two types of audiences. One is people that go to yarn shops and knit and sew already. So when they want to learn how to repair, they already have good needle skills, and it's easy to teach them how to make something last. But there's other people who are interested in making their clothes last because they are interested in the environment, etc., but they don't have any skills. And then, although they're really well-intentioned, they struggle with doing a good repair because they end up performing badly. So, some people don't even know how to thread a needle or how to sew on a button. And that, that's off-putting if you try to fix something and then it doesn't work and people kind of give up. And also the other question I often get asked is it worth repairing this? What do you think? There's not a question that I can answer. That's something you need to decide yourself. So, I've been looking up a lot of things around mending, and I'm interested in antique and vintage sewing books and manuals. So started to see a bit of a trend. And I think in the 19th and the early 20th century, mending books, sorry, I'm first talking about education, jumping ahead here a little bit, needlework was part of the curriculum for, particularly for girls at girls' schools. And I also think textiles were more valued because they were more expensive. Clothes were much more expensive. People owned fewer items, so I think almost therefore looked after them better. And when you look at the darning samplers that get made in these needlework classes, I'll show you, show you a couple examples in a second. Do notice that the ones that are really old, say from the 17th or 18th century, the really intricate, difficult repairs that the girls were taught, and then you look at samplers from the early 20th century and it's like just a little scrap of fabric with a few stitches on it. So even there's a decline. And I think at the moment, textiles is a very minor element in design and technology. And although I don't teach it myself, I guess it's very unlikely that repair techniques are part of it. So just a couple of examples of darning samplers so you know what I'm talking about. So this is a piece of knitted fabric, and then the girls had to cut a hole in it and try to fix it. So there's different techniques. The bottom you see some in red thread. When you're first learning, it's easy to see what you're doing. And then at the top, that's matching thread. And then the other one that I find very inspirational and an interesting object are these woven darning samplers, where you use colored thread. So, you know, when you're learning, it's easy to see what you're doing. And of course, also a teacher could spot mistakes easily. But the aim of these was always to try and do invisible mending. So we'll get to that in a second as well. So I don't think at home there's also a decline in mending skills. When you look at old sewing books, there's the older ones, roughly up to the 1950s, they always, almost always included a chapter on how to mend things. Whereas modern sewing books, they tend to be project focused and techniques are not so important. So, you know, it's about how to make shirts or how to make this or that. And there is a resurgence now in books around mending. They still seem to be very project-focused, but at least people are starting to address it again. And I also, when I run workshops, I often hear people saying like, oh yeah, I remember my mum mending or my granny mending, but somehow the skills haven't been passed on. And I think that has to do with the Make, Do, Mend campaign from the Second World War and the aftermath. It's a little segue into what happened there. I think a lot of things happened that has an effect even now. So during the war, many people had to wear a uniform. According to the Imperial War Museum website, about 25% of the population wore uniforms during the Second World War, either soldiers or nurses, land army girls, you know, lots of different examples. So that took away resources, material and production from civilian clothing industry. And so the government introduced this Make, Do, Mend campaign. Lots of people still know that phrase. And that was launched to encourage people to make their existing supplies of clothes last longer. And also promote the ability to repair, renovate, and make one's own clothes. Clothes were still for sale in the Second World War, and rich people could buy better quality, but the utility clothing scheme was introduced to make you know, like basic clothes with a guarantee of quality and value for money, or the coupons from the rationing. And I think in the factories, the garment manufacture, the demands on churning out loads and loads of uniforms has really accelerated the way of making clothes and fashion. So that's now kind of pushed through into what we call fast fashion. I think lots of production methods come from that time. And also it gave consumers the confidence to demand value for money. So again, that's something we see now. People don't want to spend lots of money on clothes on average. So I don't like it when people call my work Make, Do, and Mend, because I'm not making do. You know, it is cheaper to replace things usually, but I choose to mend because, you know, it's important to me for environmental reasons, sweatshop labor, all sorts of different things. And you know, people are getting more and more interested in that. So I've been thinking about how to help people value repair skills, because if you have the intention, then you know, hopefully you also have the motivation to learn more about how to repair clothes. So I also do a lot of knitting and a bit of sewing. So I've looked at that experience, and I've kind of created a bond with those clothes, because I've been involved from the very beginning, you know, choosing a pattern, the yarn, you know, and the process of making. I don't know, it's kind of creates a bond. If I look at a sweater that I've knitted, I think about I take it everywhere when I'm knitting. So you know, there's a lot of history already built in, and I think for clothes that you buy in the shop, that link isn't quite there, but clothes can still be special for you. You know, you might have bought them for a special occasion, or you have some stains on them, and that reminds you of a great dinner party with friends, or something is just cozy and comfy. That's also always important. So if you can take this creativity and choosing materials and making into mending, and make mending fun, then I think that kind of starts creating that bond again, and you're more likely to keep wearing your clothes. So, you know, make mending fun and wear your darn as a badge of honor. So I always like to say. I kind of promote that idea with my visible mending program. So I want to inspire people, share skills, and provide skills. And if you're interested in all this on social media, I always use the hashtag visible mending. I think I kind of started that on Instagram quite a few years ago, and there's now, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of posts with the visible mending hashtag, which I think is great. Yeah, sorry, that's kind of wrapping that up again. And then I think, you know, the visible mending hashtag on social media is a great way to be inspired and to be an inspiration. So that was my talk. Thank you.